when you were doing these SF missions, at what point did you go, you know what, I'm ready to take the next step? I'm going to try out for Delta and see what's going on there.
It was the first time I got shot at. I mean, I knew that I wanted more. I knew I wasn't. And as the deployment went on, I was like, okay, we're doing cool stuff. It's just we're not getting. At that point, you kind of you start hearing from other people that you knew, like in Ranger Battalion or guys that had gone over that like, and you see it too in the talk, like the task force going out, like you know who they are. Well, they're going out every night,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm only going out every once every 3 weeks to do like a DA hit. Like I was like, that's where I want to go. So I knew pretty soon into my first deployment that I was gonna go out, for KEG.
How do you prepare yourself for that? How do you start? I mean, there's probably at that point, was there how much information was out there about it to get yourself ready to figure out what you need to do to get ready?
I didn't have much. I didn't have much information. I only knew a couple of guys that were there, and they were like I didn't really. I don't even know if I reached out to them, but I had some intel on what was like just selection wise. Not many people know what goes on the other side of the fence,
Mm-hmm.
like until you're there. So I really didn't know that, but kind of got some G2 on selection a little bit, so I kind of knew what to train for. Um, so I actually started training on that deployment. Then when I got back, I mean, it was I don't know how many, if it was over a year, because I mean, like putting your packet in and then waiting for the next selection, like to actually get an invite to go to selection, that took a while too. So that the whole time I was just rucking, running, doing PT.
How do you
Like,
balance? I know you've said before that you wanted to overtrain, that you didn't care about
yeah,
overtraining. How do you do that without injuring yourself to the point where you're not going to be able to go on and
you
do
don't. I mean,
selection?
you don't know. I mean, I got lucky.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm still lucky. I'm 50 years old, and I can still go out and run a 13 miler, and my knees are fine. So I like my whole career. Just I got lucky. I had not only a body that would recover fast, but I can overtrain and do that and not hurt myself.
yeah.
Or I just got lucky that I didn't. But yeah, I think like going to selection, I in other interviews or when people ask me, I'm like, you're asking me, you should overtrain. And if you get hurt, you get hurt. But I would never want to go into a situation just with being able to do the standard.
Yeah.
Because if you just can do the standard and then you have a bad day, you're not going to have that extra gas to make it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would overtrain knowing that even if even on my worst day, like my worst day of rucking or my worst day of land nav, I was still going to be over the standard,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So yeah, I mean, I was very, I would say, different than most people. If I knew I had to do a 40 mile ruck, I would make sure I could do an 80-mile ruck.
That's
If I knew that I had to train for like 3 weeks straight, I would make sure I could do it for 6 weeks straight. And I mean, that's why the training lead up to it took so long, because I didn't ask ton of fucking training.
yeah. I like that you mentioned meeting the standard and stuff, because I've talked about this a bunch of times on the show about how I ran into these army captains in Iraq and Kuwait. They were Apache guys, and they asked me and my buddies. We were three Marines walking. They were like, "Hey, what are your guys' minimum amount of crunches you have to do?" And we were like, "I don't know, 30 something." Like none of us knew. And he
Right.
looked at the other army
Not,
guy. He's like, "That's the fucking difference. The Marines don't even know the minimum amount. They only know the top score."
that's how
And
it should be.
I say this, I've said it on the podcast a bunch, but it's a weird mindset. And when you hear that people are shooting for the minimum, you're like, what? Like that doesn't even like why would you ever do that?
I had tons of people, not tons, but a good more than a handful of people like going to selection, and all they were doing was like running. Like they weren't even working on the rucks, because they were like, well, if I'm doing a lot of rucking, I might screw my ankles up, might screw my knees up, might screw my hips up. And I was like, you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for one, like the rucking, it wasn't not only being on my worst day to be able to do more than the standard, but it was like just getting everything ready, like having so I'm not chafing, I'm not chafing on my body. I'm not getting blisters Like the more that you ruck, the more miles you do, the better your boots get broken in, the better your feet get broken in. So like both SF and the unit selection, I never even got a hot spot, which a lot of people don't know what a hot spot is. So it's right before you get a blister. That's what they call a hot spot. So a lot of people will get hot spots and get lucky and not turn into a blister. I didn't even get a hot spot.
Nice.
Like I mean, like I would get done each day and be like, take my boots off, and I wouldn't even feel like I did 10 miles because I had overtrained. I mean, like people that are going to selection that are always asking me what you train up for. Not only I would overtrain, but like tons of people that I knew that were getting ready for it or trying to get ready for it, they were doing their rucks on pavement.
Mm.
Like that's flat ground. You're not gonna be on pavement when you're doing it for real. When you're at selection. So like when I would do my rucks, even if that's all I had, like if I was in the city and I had to like train up in the city, like instead of walking on the road, I would walk on the side of the road. So not only was I on the grass, but where I was walking, it was at a camp.
Mm-hmm.
So my feet were slipping the whole time I was walking. Well, the more you get blisters early on, the more your feet are gonna get tough.
Yeah, it's all those little things, right?
Yeah. But a lot of people run and ruck on the road. It's like, man, if you're truly like trying to get ready for something that's going to be in the woods, well, that's where you need to do your rucks. That's where you need to do your runs.
Yeah.
Not on the street.
Climbing mountains and stuff is way different than out just hiking down the street. I'm lucky enough to be here in California, in Southern California. Well, lucky in that it's a nice place. Shitty that it's got shitty politics.
Yeah.
So let me be clear. But like I could drive up to like Mount Baldy. It's just over 10,000 feet. That's a solid, I think 12-mile hike or something round trip. That's like the opportunities to do something like that, are there. Whereas if I live in like Missouri, I don't know if that's necessarily, well, maybe Missouri has some spots too actually, but you know what I'm saying? Like not everybody has that opportunity to get out and get in the mountains and get in the hills and stuff.
When I trained for the unit selection, I was in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Florida is nothing but flat. We have no hills.
Yeah.
So like I would go find like bridges that had elevation, and I would literally walk 10 miles up and down the bridge, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, because that gave me elevation up and it gave me elevation down. Even though it wasn't like a mountain, it was still better than being on flat ground.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'd find a parking garage and just walk up and down the parking garage, like for hours.
Yeah,
because that was giving me some kind of elevation.
Yeah, so, you got to make do. You got to make do with whatever you got.
Yep.
That's like if you want to be a Navy SEAL, but you live somewhere where there's not open water. At least find a lake or something and get in, something that's not a pool and swim. Make do. Yeah, I mean, when you got through, did you pass it all in one go? Did you pass selection on the first time through?
Yep.
What did it feel like after you got that nod, like you made it?
So that's kind of a funny story. And, I don't want to piss anyone off. But when you find out you made it,
mm-hmm.
I mean, couldn't have been happier. That was like one of the best days of my life. Like you made it, Yeah. Cause I mean, there's nothing above that. Like there's nowhere else to go. Like that is the best. So 100% was cool feeling. But like when I got done with one of the last things you do at selection, cause some people it might have, it could have been the hardest thing they ever did. Like I literally got to where the guy, but I can't remember what the heck they say to you, but they have this speech that they say, and congratulations, you completed selection, blah blah blah, and I literally almost came out of my mouth. I almost said, "Is that it?"
Oh.
I didn't say that, but like I couldn't believe it was over. Like I was like, there has to be more.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't. And that's why I don't want to piss anyone off. I'm not trying to be an asshole, but for me, because I overtrained so much, I was not that tired when I got to that last point when they say that. So like in my mind, no shit. Like I almost said to the guy, it almost came out of my mouth. Is that it? So to me, selection to me was was actually for both selections were really fun. Like again, it's going back to being as a kid. I like to be in the woods. I like to do things by myself.
Mm-hmm.
SF and the unit selection, SF at the time that I went through, they had gone back to individual selection. It wasn't like the team building stuff.
Okay.
So to me, I'm out in the woods doing my own thing. Like I have a task. I'm gonna complete it. I don't have to worry about anyone else. I don't have to wait on anyone else. I actually enjoyed being out in the woods doing that. And because I had overtrained, I wasn't smoked. So like to me, it was every single day on land nav was me getting to be out in the woods looking for a next spot to go to. Like it was like I was on a nature hike every day with a ruck on.
Getting paid to go hike.
It was crazy. I mean, like I actually enjoyed it. I went back to selection in the unit as a cadre. I would have gone back as a student 5 times before going back as a cadre.
Really? Why is that?
Because a cadre, you have responsibilities.
Oh.
Like you're waking up earlier, you're going to bed later, you have to do all this stuff and be prepared for all this stuff. Whereas a student, here's your points, go get them. You know, I mean, it's like it's straight up to you. So the earlier you get done, the more downtime you have.
Mm-hmm.
As a cadre, that was not the case at all. So to me, I mean, I would have literally gone back 5 times as a student before going back as a cadre. But some people actually like to go up there as a cadre. I hated it. It was horrible.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, because I actually enjoyed being out in the woods. Like, all right, here's your points. This is what you got to do. It's on you.
How was the land nav different there from what you were teaching yourself in Florida and doing? Yeah,
totally different. That's another good question that people always ask. Which selection was harder? I actually think SF selection was harder.
Yeah.
And not because, and not physically. So the unit selection was definitely harder physically on the amount of walking you did. But the land nav, it's huge in both selections. The land nav was so much harder in SF selection because you're doing it at Bragg, and there's not much terrain where you're doing it. So it's all dead reckoning. It's all looking at the compass, going, and they have night land nav at SF selection too. Where the unit selection, it's just all during the day. But like where we do it at the unit, there's so much terrain. You look at your map, you get your plot, you literally look, to where you're going. You look at the mountaintop, you're like, okay, that's where I need to go.
Mm-hmm.
Like I barely was on the compass the whole time at the unit selection.
Yeah.
You kind of gotta keep track of your pace, just so you know. But if you can keep your eyes on that mountain you're going to, you're literally just running through the woods to get there. Like, I don't need to be on compass. I don't need to be a pace. Where SF selection, I mean, you were like this the whole time. Yeah. Like you have to stay on the compass. You got to know. I mean, you're dead reckoning. So that was very challenging. It's not easy to dead reckon.
No, it's not. I mean, it's like one of the worst things because if you're a little off, that throws everything off afterwards.
Yeah, especially if you're going over a long distance. And land nav is fun. It's that is something that another thing that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the aspect of being on a compass, but it's the whole like plotting your course, plotting your route. Mm-hmm. I thought that was awesome. Like I would get both SF and the unit selection. I was always the last one to leave the point. Because I would get the next point, I'd go down, like I'd go over by myself where it was all quiet. I'd plot my course, like I would have that thing dialed in. A lot of other people would be like, "All right, here's where I'm going. All right, I got a quick azimuth. This is where I need to go," and then they would take off. I actually enjoyed plotting the routes. Like, all right, I could skirt here, I could do this, I can go over here. I don't need to go over this. Like that actually was like wasn't a challenge, but it was very, very fun for me to do that. So again, that's why I enjoyed being at selection.
Some people can't look at a map and see the terrain. When you're looking at these contour lines, they just can't imagine it. I don't know why, but I've always been able to like just visualize it. Like, I see the saddle right there. That's a better way to go through than climbing this big ass fucking whatever.
Right.
And that makes land nav way more enjoyable.
That was the fun part of it, right? Because most people if they don't know how to read a map correctly, they're gonna look at, all right, what is the shortest distance to get to that next point? Mm-hmm. Well, that shortest distance could take you over a mountaintop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's at 7,000 feet or whatever. You know, where you could just go around it, even though it's going to add a couple thousand meters. It's still going to save you time in the long run, not going all the way up there, and the physical exertion that you're taking, you know, doing that.